Before you knew who you were, you learned who you needed to be to survive. That's where it starts. Not with identity, but with adaptation. As a child, you didn't have language for fear, or shame, or rejection. So you developed strategies. You smiled when it hurt. You stayed quiet when you wanted to speak. You became helpful, invisible, perfect, strong. Not because it was natural, but because it was necessary. Carl Jung called this the formation of the persona, the mask we wear to function in society. But here's the part we often miss. The persona isn't the problem. It's the part of you that kept you safe, that made you lovable in environments where love came with conditions. The wound doesn't just live in your memory. It lives in your behaviors, your reactions, your roles. You think you're being yourself, but often you're performing the version of yourself that was safest to be. Trauma doesn't just scar you, it sculpts you. And the mask you built to survive, it became your face. But underneath, always, something else was waiting. Not weaker, not broken, just buried. When the pain becomes too much, the psyche splits. One part continues, functional, composed, even successful. That's the self you show the world. But beneath it, hidden in the silence, another part remains frozen. The part that felt the fear, the betrayal, the abandonment. The part that was told, directly or indirectly, this version of you is not acceptable. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the part of the self that holds what we reject, repress, or deny. Not just anger or shame, but also brilliance, desire, sensitivity, strength. Anything that felt unsafe to express was exiled. And the deeper the wound, the wider the split. You live with the illusion of being whole, but you feel the fracture. In the anxiety that comes out of nowhere. In the emotional responses that feel disproportionate. In the emptiness that no amount of success can fix. This is not weakness, it's protection. Your psyche did what it had to do to shield you from what you couldn't yet process. But the cost of that protection is disconnection. From others, yes, but more dangerously, from yourself. The shadow isn't the enemy. It's the part of you that remembers what the rest of you had to forget. And until you turn toward it, you'll keep searching for something outside to fix what only truth can heal. When something breaks in childhood, love, safety, trust, the psyche rushes to make meaning out of it. Because children don't just feel pain, they internalize it, they make it personal. If a parent withdraws, they assume they were too much. If a caregiver explodes, they believe they caused it. If love is inconsistent, they learn it must be earned. The child doesn't say, "This was a dysfunctional environment." They say, "Something's wrong with me." And so a story is born, one built on survival, one that explains the chaos in a way that gives them just enough stability to carry on. But that story, left unchallenged, becomes identity. Jung warned about this. He knew that what begins as a coping mechanism can become a prison. The child who learned to always help becomes the adult who can't ask for anything. The child who felt invisible becomes the adult who performs endlessly for attention. The child who felt unsafe speaking up becomes the adult who overanalyzes every word they say. It's not who you are, it's who you had to become. But the danger is this. If you live in survival too long, you forget it was ever temporary. The behaviors calcify, the patterns repeat, the mask fuses with the face. You start calling trauma personality. You defend the very wounds that once broke you. And yet, buried beneath all that noise, the real self remains. Not perfect, not untouched, but whole, waiting to be remembered. Because you weren't born this guarded. You were shaped by pain, but you were never meant to stay there. Chapter 4. The repetition compulsion. Why you're drawn to what hurt you. It doesn't make sense on the surface. You escape the past, swear you'll never feel that pain again, and then find yourself right back in it. Same story, different characters. You attract the emotionally unavailable. You tolerate disrespect. You sabotage connection. And you wonder, why does this keep happening? Carl Jung would say, it's not a coincidence, it's a compulsion. Freud called it the repetition compulsion, and Jung expanded on it. It's the psyche's attempt to relive the trauma, not to suffer, but to resolve. It's as if something deep inside you is trying to find the missing piece, to rewrite the ending, to finally feel what you never got to feel. Love, safety, power, belonging. But here's the catch. Until you bring that compulsion into awareness, You won't rewrite the story. You'll repeat it. The child who was never chosen seeks partners who withhold love, hoping this time they'll be picked. The child who is constantly criticized seeks environments where they're judged, hoping this time they'll prove their worth. The wound recreates itself again and again, because the psyche is still trying to understand it. And that's where healing begins, not in avoiding the patterns, but in understanding the part of you that keeps chasing them. Jung believed that what you do not make conscious will return as fate. Until you face the original wound, the world will keep triggering it, not to punish you, but to wake you up. You're not broken for repeating. You're human. But it's time to stop surviving your past and start rewriting it. One of Jung's most powerful insights was this: we don't see the world as it is. We see it as we are, through the lens of memory, through the filter of pain, through the wound we haven't yet faced. And that's what projection is, a psychological shortcut. The parts of ourselves we've disowned get cast onto others. If you've repressed anger, you'll see it in everyone else. If you've buried your need for love, you'll see others as too needy, too emotional, too much. The world becomes a screen and your unconscious plays the movie. This isn't malicious, it's unconscious, a survival reflex. Your mind tries to keep you safe by placing your unresolved emotions somewhere outside of you, where they can be judged, avoided, controlled. But projection doesn't heal you, it keeps you stuck. You think it's about them. The boss who reminds you of your controlling parent, the partner who triggers your abandonment wound, the friend who feels too much like you did when you were punished for expressing yourself. But it's not about them. It's about the part of you you still can't look at without flinching. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The question is, are you willing to stop blaming the mirror long enough to face what it's showing you? Because until you do, you'll live in reaction, mistaking triggers for truth, mistaking other people for your past. And the longer you project, the farther you drift from yourself. Some people cope with trauma by collapsing, others cope by rising, but in the wrong direction. They become successful, focused, impressive, accomplished, driven, and underneath it all, deeply disconnected." Jung understood this. The false self doesn't always look broken. Sometimes it looks polished, high-achieving, high-functioning. But if you look closer, you'll see the cracks. A constant anxiety that something will fall apart, a pressure to perform, an inability to rest, to receive, to just be. Why? Because their worth was tied to doing, not being. Somewhere along the way, love became conditional. Acceptance became transactional. And the child learned, if I achieve enough, I'll be safe. If I succeed, I'll be loved. And so the mask was born. The perfect self, the competent one, the strong one. But behind it, fear, loneliness, exhaustion. The haunting feeling that if they stop performing, no one will stay. This is why healing can feel like failure. Because for the high-functioning wounded, slowing down feels dangerous. Saying, "I'm not okay," feels like betrayal. But the truth is, you can't heal what you're pretending not to feel. The false self may win you applause, but it will never bring you peace. Jung's path was clear: integration over image, truth over performance, depth over display. Because what you hide to be loved isn't loved, only the mask is. And one day you'll get tired of pretending. It doesn't knock politely, it doesn't ask for permission. It shows up in the places you wish it wouldn't, in conflict, in heartbreak, in the quiet moments when you finally slow down and hear yourself again. This is the return of the shadow. Carl Jung knew the psyche had a perfect memory. What we repress doesn't die. It waits. The emotions you weren't allowed to feel, the truths you weren't ready to speak, the needs you buried so deeply they almost disappeared, they all come back, not to punish you, but to be integrated. And how do they return? Through symptoms, anxiety, rage, sadness, numbness, nightmares, that gnawing feeling that something is missing, even when your life looks fine. The shadow doesn't want to destroy your life, it wants to make it real. But integration is uncomfortable. It asks you to face the parts of yourself you once judged, feared, or abandoned. The anger you swallowed, the fear you hid, the ambition you suppressed because someone once said it made you too much. You will be tempted to silence it again, to distract, to run. But every time you turn away, you reinforce the split, the illusion that there is a good you and a bad you. Jung's path is different. He invites you to meet your shadow, to ask what it's trying to protect, to stop seeing your discomfort as a flaw, and start seeing it as a message. The shadow is not your enemy. It's the part of you that remembers the truth. Individuation is Jung's word for becoming whole. Not perfect, not enlightened, but whole. And to do that, you have to stop chasing the version of yourself that others applauded and start remembering the one you buried to survive. This is not about returning to your childhood. It's about rescuing what you lost there. The voice you silenced, the curiosity you traded for control, the tenderness you replaced with performance. The trauma shaped your identity, yes. But it isn't your identity. It's a layer, a shell, a temporary self that protected you long enough to get you here. And now that you're here, the deeper work begins. Individuation is a process of returning inward, not to fix yourself, but to reclaim yourself. You become the one who holds space for the child you once were. You learn to speak what was unspeakable. You learn to stay present with what once made you hide, and slowly, something begins to shift. The mask becomes unnecessary. The roles start to dissolve. You feel more grounded, not because life gets easier, but because you stop abandoning yourself in the middle of it. Jung believed the soul has its own direction, its own logic. And when you stop living for others, for safety, for applause, you begin to hear it again. Not a scream, not a demand, but a quiet knowing. The self you were always meant to become, the one that trauma couldn't erase, only delay. Carl Jung didn't ask us to escape pain. He asked us to transform it, to let it speak, to let it soften us, deepen us, sharpen us. Not just for ourselves, but for the world. This is alchemy, the process of turning something raw, chaotic, and dark into something integrated, conscious, and meaningful. You can't do that by bypassing your suffering or intellectualizing your trauma. You do it by entering the wound, by learning to feel what you once numbed, to speak what you once silenced, to touch the ache without collapsing. Most people try to escape their pain. Jung knew that was a dead end, because pain, unprocessed, becomes identity, but pain, metabolized, becomes fuel, becomes clarity, becomes direction. You begin to see your story not as proof that you're broken, but as evidence that you endured, that your depth was earned, that your compassion isn't weakness. It's wisdom forged in the fire you thought would destroy you. When you carry your pain consciously, it stops becoming something you project onto others. It becomes something you offer, not as performance, not as self-pity, but as truth. And truth, when carried with humility, becomes medicine. Healing doesn't make you flawless, it makes you real. It's not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. The child who laughed before they were self-conscious, the teenager who felt everything deeply before being told to toughen up, the soul who never needed to earn worth because it was already whole. The false self is built to protect, but it comes with a cost, distance from your own life. You smile when you're not okay. You perform confidence when you feel hollow. You say yes when your body says no. And the more you do it, the harder it is to tell what's real anymore. Jung didn't offer escape, he offered return, a way back to what you exiled, a way to stop performing and start living, even if it's messier, even if it's quieter, even if it's not what anyone expected. Because wholeness isn't glamorous, it's honest. You stop chasing applause, you stop explaining your worth, you stop needing everyone to understand. You're no longer controlled by fear. You're no longer managed by shame. You're no longer reacting to a wound you've already faced. That's the freedom Jung was pointing to. And it's not out there. It's in the parts of you you're still learning to love. If this journey spoke to something buried but alive in you, consider subscribing. This isn't a space for easy answers. It's for the ones who are done performing, who are ready to walk back through the wound, not to stay there, but to reclaim what was never truly lost. You were never broken, only waiting to return.